Yeah, go for it. Yeah! Camera's on? Yep. Verify? Yep. Alright guys, it's time to continue the Hot VLT project that we started on the channel about a month ago. If you guys missed the intro on this project, basically we're flowing the engine backwards. The exhaust ports are now the intake ports, and the intake ports are now the exhaust ports. Rather than having the exhaust on the side, it's now in the middle, and rather than having the intake in the middle, it's now on the side. Now this project has sparked quite a few questions from many of you out there, such as, will it even work? Will it make power? Will it immediately brake? Will it rev past 5,500 RPM? But most important to me is, will it sound cool? And today we're gonna get this thing running and answer a lot of those questions for you guys. So let's get into it. In the last video, we started to make our first intake manifold, but we still had to do one of the most important parts, and that was to add provisions for our fuel injectors. So we chucked up the intake manifold into the milling machine and began to mill in pockets so that we could install our injector bungs. Now the injector bungs that we decided to go with are from ICT Billet, and as you're about to see, I had a few issues with them. Alright guys, I picked up these injector bungs from ICT Billet. One criticism about these things is they're not really machined to a common size. It's like 21.5 millimeters or so. I'm just going to stick them in the lathe and lathe them down to 13/16 because that's the size drill bit I have. But it would be nice if they made these things in like a commonly available size. I don't know, just a side note. So let's get these cut down and get them welded in. With the injector bungs now sized correctly, it was time to get them welded into the intake runners. This is kind of a tedious process because you need to be kind of careful with how you manage the heat in order to not melt into the machine surface that the injector O-ring needs to seal against. But you're also welding a thick material to a very thin material that is the intake runner. This has taken me years of practice in order to even just do it as well as what I can, and what I can is certainly not perfect. Another thing to consider is we got to make sure that the injectors are installed at the same height. When I milled in the pockets to the intake, I made sure that they went to the same depth, but you can see here that I'm using a ruler just to double check that they are at the right elevation, and making adjustments as needed. From here, I got the rest of them welded up, and it was time to get the injectors sort of roughed in. And then we had to do another important part, which was mount our fuel rail. Now with this project, we're going with some Bosch 210-pound injectors, and I use them to kind of mock up the fuel rail, and then mill up some fuel rail hold-down brackets, and get them welded to the intake manifold. This stuff takes a lot of time, but when you're doing custom stuff like this, it's to be expected. Alright, we got intake number 1 done. Now we just need to finish up intake number 2. And there we go. And this thing's really coming out pretty cool, guys. Next, I think we're going to drop this thing into the chassis, and then we can finish up the intakes and figure out how we're going to get this thing running. Alright guys, getting the last tube welded up onto the collector, and I just wanted to show you guys a little trick that we use. You can see I've cut this little window here. Basically I've taken this portion of the pipe and I've cut it out, and you can see that I've welded the inside of the pipe rather than try to weld the outside. It's really hard to get your torch down inside of here and get this welded up. And now that we have the inside welded, we'll put this window back in place here, and we should be able to weld up all the portions that we can get to, and that will complete the Hot V exhaust manifold for this project. Alright guys, before we throw this into the car, I wanted to do one last thing. I actually screwed up in the last episode. I forgot that the LS has a 1.7 rocker ratio and the LT has a 1.8 rocker ratio. That means our camshaft, which is 585 lift, goes from 585 to 619 lift, and the PAC 1218 springs that I installed in the last episode are not compatible with that amount of lift. Therefore, I had to get some 660 lift springs. I sourced these from Tick Performance, and I had to swap them into the engine just to make sure that we would not run into any issues with that. All right, guys, it's time to get this sealed up for the last time. And in order to do that, I'm going to use some of this stuff. Now, people use this a lot of times to seal up the exhaust manifolds on their like their headers and stuff. And hopefully it should be good enough for this situation right here. I did not bother to put any like O-ring provisions into this flange here. So hopefully this silicone is enough to get this sealed up, but we'll find out. I also dug out some dirty old LS top row head bolts, and that's what we're going to use for these bolts here. I bought these spacers off of Amazon, and we should be good to go. So let's get this sealed up. All right, look at that. All sealed up. Man, don't you love it when a plan comes together? This looks great. Another thing we need to solve is how do we get oil in this thing? Once we put the crossover pipe here in the back, it's going to be hard to get to this cap here. And once we add the pipe to the front here, it's going to be hard to get to this oil fill right here. So we kind of need another way to get oil into the engine without having to remove our intake manifolds and stick a funnel into the valve cover. So we're going to put a little cap right here, and that will allow us to pull this cap off. There's this nice little open area in the back of the engine, and we can put a funnel in there and get oil into the engine. So let's get that done. Alright guys, so I have the front cover pulled off because we need to convert it to a front cover that has the cam sensor in it. Previously we were running it with this gear right here because we were running it with a micro squirt, which is wasted spark, and we don't need a cam sensor. There's no provision in the back, but now we are going to be running a Holley Dominator, so I want to run this thing full sequential. So we're going to convert it to this gear right here. But before we put that on, I noticed a little problem starting to develop here at the front. You can see that the gasket here has pushed out of the side of this little camshaft retention plate. So we're gonna have to fix that. All right, so I'm gonna pull this apart. We're gonna have a look at it. Kind of difficult to do this with one hand. Yep, that is a problem that was about to really start to get ugly. So we're going to replace this gasket here, and hopefully that will fix our problem here. Hey buddy. Looks like we have a little visitor. This is not your home, dude. This is not your home. You gotta leave, okay? You've been playing hide and seek with me all day. So this little dude, he crawled in over here. He was chewing on a bar of soap. Now, he's right there, staring at me. Should I try and catch him? Looks like he's falling asleep. What are you doing, buddy? Huh? Yeah, I'm talking to you. You know you're supposed to hide from me. Dude. You can't be in here. Dude. Seriously. Dude. Go home. Seriously, dude? Really? Are you serious? Come on, dude. I gotcha. See ya, buddy. Alright, you're a free mouse now. See ya. Now that we had that distraction out of the way, it was time to get back on the task at hand. We were barreling our way, getting closer to the first startup. But before that, we needed to get the engine into the chassis. So it was time for the old engine to come out, but I decided before we put the new engine in, it made sense to clean out the engine bay and give it a nice fresh coat of paint to match the color that I planned to paint the body. I gotta say, this came out pretty fantastic. I'm very happy with it. And from here, it was time to drop in the new engine.
Actually, no, this truck actually, its weight bias is 50% to the rear.
Down.
Primers went 985 yesterday, so it gets an in the ballpark. Here comes the bad influence gasser. Located in the bar and restaurant, right next to the pavilion and directly across from the Summit Racing Equipment Truck.
Alright guys, it's time to talk about engine management, and for that we are going with a Holley Dominator ECU. Now right after we released the first video on this project, almost immediately Holley reached out and asked if they could help with this project. Now, I'll be honest, I was already planning to run a Holley ECU on this project just because I knew it was a bit unconventional and their closed loop fueling is just superior to everything else. And I knew with a project like this, my fuel table was gonna look a little weird, and I could really use that help with the closed loop fueling system. Now, I was planning to run a Terminator X system on this project, and that was going to present some challenges with the dual throttle bodies. After I spoke with the guys over at Holley for a little bit, they actually came to the conclusion that we should run a Dominator because it supports dual drive-by-wire control. Now, how this works is you have one plug here that goes to your single pedal in the car, and then you have two throttle body outputs here that go to your dual drive-by-wire throttles. So it takes the command from this one throttle pedal and commands two throttle bodies to open. This is going to be way cleaner than having to come up with some sort of apparatus to control two drive-by cable throttles, and I'm super happy to have this solution in our court because this is going to make it so much easier. Now, having the Dominator also opens up massive potential in other areas. We get the ability to run methanol, big boy fuel injectors, and we could monitor literally everything on the car with the amount of I/O that this thing has. So I'm super excited to play with all of that, but that wasn't all that they sent to us. They also sent one of their LS2 main harnesses, and this was actually the one that they suggested, and I gotta say, they pretty much nailed it. As you can see on this engine, there's a lot of stuff that is in some pretty unconventional places. I knew that there was going to be a little bit of challenge with a drop-on wiring harness, but I'm happy to say that I haven't had to change a whole lot on this engine harness in order to get things where they need to go. In fact, the injector harness is really the only thing that I've had to make any splices or lengthening of wires. Obviously, the injectors are pretty wide off to the side of the engine, so you're gonna have that. But it looks like everything else is going to be able to reach to where it needs to go on the engine, and I gotta say that is very much a treat for somebody that has built his own wiring harnesses quite a few times in the past. Now, along with the ECU and harnesses, they also sent one of their drop-in 12-bolt fuel cell setups to install a set of dual 450 liter per hour pumps into your fuel cell of choice. Now, I will admit that this is way more pump than we're probably going to need for this project. I really would be happy with 600 wheel horsepower with this, but this also opens us up to be able to try different fuel choices, such as maybe some methanol, and still have enough pump to be able to support the amount of fuel flow that we're gonna need for this engine combination. Frankly, one of these pumps is probably enough to support our horsepower goals, at least on E85, but having that little bit of overhead is always a good idea, so happy to be able to use one of these as well. So huge thanks to the guys over at Holley. I've been a huge fan of their products ever since I was introduced to them by Matt over at the Sloppy Mechanics YouTube channel. And my only criticism of them in the past has come from a place of not being able to run them on my particular project because they can't support everything. So with that, let's get this harness laid out on the engine and get this thing closer to starting up. All right, guys, it's time to get our in-tank fuel pump assembly into our fuel tank. Now, this is a pretty easy process, and it's nice that Holley makes this whole setup to be adjustable to whatever your tank depth is. So first, we have to mark out some holes to drill. You need to take your gasket and lay it over the holes in your cell, kind of like this, and then you're going to mark these two locations here. We're going to be running zip ties through those two holes to hold this plate up in place because you won't have access to reach down through and hold this plate up while you get the bolts started. Now, this cell also had a piece of foam inside of it. We like to remove the foam because E85 likes to eat up foam like that. At least that's been our experience in the past. Even with like the E85 compatible stuff, it still seems to decay. And we shouldn't really have any fuel sloshing issues with this setup. At least I'm not super worried about it. Now, when you drill these holes, make sure that you also get down in here and vacuum out the cell. You don't want any particulates to make their way into your fuel filter and potentially clog up or cause any premature wear. Then to set our depth for our fuel pumps, you take a ruler and you line it up against the tank. You take that measurement, looks like it's about 8 3/8 of an inch. And then you come over to your fuel pump assembly. You measure down to the bottom of your fuel pumps and you adjust this bracket accordingly. There's 2 set screws in this thing that allow you to adjust it up and down on these rods here. Now, our tank is going to be deep enough that we don't need this additional length here at the bottom. So you literally are going to take a pair of pliers, snap this off, because it will actually hit the bottom of the tank, and we don't need that. It's nice that they make this so that you can snap it off. That way you're not using any abrasive tools that are going to get dust and dirt into locations that you don't want it. So, let's get to work. From here, we started to figure out how we were going to complete the intake manifolds. We needed a pipe to come forward and then have a throttle body flange, and a crossover pipe in the rear in order to equalize pressure between the two plenums. Now, initially, we welded it up with the design that you see us working on here, and I ended up going back and changing it just because I wasn't super happy with how it looked. Originally, we were trying to keep the belt tensioner in the factory location, but I ended up deciding that we just needed to relocate the thing and get the piping and the throttle body into a more aesthetically pleasing location. And I'm really glad that we went back and made those changes because this thing, this thing looks really, really sick. I am super happy with it, and I hope that you guys are as excited about it as I am. Now, laying out the first side is usually pretty easy, but it's getting the second side to actually match it that is the hard part. Now, obviously with a V8 engine, there's going to be a certain bank offset, meaning the one bank will sit further ahead of the other, and that was kind of hard to manage with this manifold setup, especially because I didn't really consider it on the first side. So you're going to see that there's a slight bit of inconsistency between the two sides. The one side's slightly further forward than the other, but I did my best to make them match and look symmetric, and I'm super happy with how it came out. But the question is all this work going to be a huge waste of time, or is it going to have the exhaust note that I am after? So it's time to move towards the first start. Alright guys, it's finally time to try and get this thing running, and as you can see, this is very much a zip ties and bubblegum type of approach here. We got wires running everywhere. I've tried to make it somewhat tidy, but I mean, as you can see here, we got our fuel cell sitting right here. We got a battery sitting right here. We're just gonna run the bare essentials to the engine, and obviously we'll have to do some cleanup later, but I just gotta hear this thing. This is a heck of a lot of work to put in for it to not sound cool, and it's time. So without further ado, let's fire this thing up.
Ready?
Yep. We got fuel.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's ready.
Ready?
Sure. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah! The camera's on?
Yep.
Verify?
Yep.
That sounds cool.
You want to check stuff real quick? See what the oil pressure spiked up to.
It works.
That, Holley needs to know that that was the first, that says a lot about that product. Alright, well, I'm going to crank it first without so we can listen for that noise. Okay, that was fuel in it. Ready?
Alright, I would expect this to take a little less fuel than normal because of the intake valves. So I'm going to take some out of the fuel map.
Well, you can see the fuel coming out the exhaust.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. So I'm going to take like 20% out of it.
Okay.
Like minus.
Well, there's a little bit of heat in there, and it sounds like it's hitting on all cylinders, so that's a good sound.
Yeah. It was going to be.
Ready?
Yep. I liked it better with more fuel.
What's the, hold on.
What?
I want you to look at the fuel pressure gauge while I'm cranking, running the fuel.
Yeah, it's like 65. Okay, which is fine. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if it ran out of fuel or was because of the funky angle. Ready? Yeah. That's way too much rubbish. Okay, way too much fuel. That sounds obnoxious.
Yep.
Why are you putting a turbo on this thing? That was only.
Are we done revving the engine?
Yeah, that was 6,800. Yeah, I was gonna say that was. Yep.
Okay.
Come on. Well, they said it wouldn't work. Works. Cool. Holy mackerel. It sounds.
It revs fast.
Yeah. That thing revs like. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's gonna be cool.
That's a lot of fuel.
Well, yeah. I mean,
I get it.
I'm dealing with an engine that nobody has ever done.
Somebody's done it. Nobody's done it on video.
You know, trying to take a guess at an engine that's extremely unconventional, so. Cool.
Just put your L33 tune in it.
Right, yeah.
LC -9.
Yeah. LC, what's the opposite of it? We decided to fire it up one more time and do a couple more rev checks, just because we wanted to see what would happen if we put a little bit of a pipe on the end of the collector. The theory was it would have more area to sort of collect the pulses together, and you're going to see the pipe actually fly off during our test, so you'll get a good A-B comparison, maybe a little unintentionally. So let's hear what it sounds like. Let's see, okay. Way too much fuel. Woo! That thing revs fast. Small valves. Yep. That's torquey. Torquey. Okay, we good? All right, let's get it. Well, guys, that sounded awesome. I am super excited to get this thing finished up. I think we have a few tweaks here and there that we got to make. We got a sort of choo-choo sound that's coming from the engine that we got to diagnose. And obviously this thing doesn't have a cooling system, an intercooler, or, well, the turbos that we promised to put on this thing. I gotta say huge thanks to the guys over at Holley for helping us out with this build. This thing fired right up. We got a little bit of tweaks we got to do on that side as well. Obviously, this is kind of an unconventional setup, so you can't really expect the bass tune to just fire up and idle. Kind of like something a little more, reasonable. But I really think we got something to build off of here, and I cannot wait to get this thing more refined and finally hear what it's going to sound like when it's all said and done. The next time that you guys see this, it will have turbos. And hopefully we can run this thing down the road or at least do a burnout in the driveway. So with that, I'm going to end this video off here. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you share it with your friends, as sure you're probably going to do. Hit the hype button, and we'll see you in the next one. And another thing, we actually just started a podcast. I'm sitting here on the set of it. So if you guys are interested in that, I will put a link up here or down in the description. Go subscribe to our podcast channel. Looking forward to seeing you guys over there.
Now, you don't need to do multiple taps. You just do bong, a bong. Okay?
Yeah, but I said this is, so as you can see, I can have this fuel cell right here
Yeah.
and a battery right here.
Go.
Oh. Alright. Alright. We can pick this up later, Cameron.